Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. Her knuckles hammered the door like a debt collector. I froze mid-step and felt the old instinct rise. Locks clicked under my fingers and the chain held. "I need you" came through the woods, steady and raw. Everything after that would change, something I wasn't ready to move. Amara, 36. I cracked the door and met eyes that didn't blink. "Daniel is dead," she said, voice clipped to the bone. "My baby needs survivor benefits," she added, hands tight on a folder. The chain trembled and so did I. "Who are you?" Lee, her jaw set like a doorstop. 27, she lifted the folder a little higher. "His child needs proof you existed in his life." That last word hooked and pulled. "Show me something real." I unlatched the chain. She stepped inside and held out a certificate. A photo rode shotgun behind it like backup. "I don't lie about babies," she said, breath short. I believed the tremor more than the ink. "Why me and not his family?" "He listed me first after the split," she shot back. "Trooper called me, I got the body release." The room tilted and corrected like a bad step. I braced on the table and counted heartbeats. "Date of death?" 2 months ago," she said, eyes never leaving mine. Silence stretched like cable about to snap. I hated that he could still reroute my day. I hated that I already knew I'd help. "What exactly do you need?" "Your decree, his last employer, anything tying him to wages." "SSA wants clean lines and dates," she added, shoulders squared. "And you want me to sign?" I said, hearing the future. She nodded once and didn't look away. "Ground rules," I pointed to the folder. "Nothing leaves here without copies for both of us. No lies, no guesses dressed as facts." She exhaled like she'd been holding water. "I can live with truth if it pays rent." I unlocked the small middle box and paused. Old papers pressed together like strangers in an elevator. Decree on top, W-2s stacked behind it. A thin notebook where he tracked mileage and fuel. History throbbed under my thumb and asked for blood. Lee didn't crowd me, she watched my hands. "Those entries match dispatch texts," she murmured, eyes flicking down. "Loads to Denver and back." He was always running. Always was a word that burned, so I cut it short. I slid the decree free and let the rest breathe. "SSA wants proof you were married, then divorced." "They want wages linked to him," she continued, voice steadier now. "They want custody proof for me," she added, chin lifted. "I can handle that part if you anchor dates." Anchor felt right and wrong at the same time. "Employer last year." She hesitated, and that meant trouble was waiting. "Alias on some runs," I heard myself admit before she asked. "He borrowed a dot number through family," I added, pulse sharp. Her mouth tightened like a promise about to break. "That complicates verification," she said, thumb on the folder edge. "It doesn't kill it," I answered because I knew the path. Wages show up even when names play games. I opened the notebook to a week that still hurt. The numbers lined up like tracks you can't leave. My phone buzzed on the counter, then again. I flipped it and saw a name I didn't want. Dispatch from the old yard, still saved, still risky. Lee's gaze followed the light and then my face. "You have someone who picks up," she said, almost a dare. "I have someone who owes me," I corrected, jaw set. I typed a short message with dates and a name. The typing dots appeared and vanished and returned. "Call tonight, no records." By text came back fast. My stomach dropped because that was the honest lane. Lee shifted the folder closer and lowered her voice. "If this fails, the claim stalls and back pay freezes. Every week matters for formula, and formula isn't cheap." Her knuckles whitened on the stroller handle like a clamp. A quiet sound from the blankets reminded us of stakes. "Listen," I leaned in because distance wastes time. "I will confirm the marriage and the divorce. I will tie him to those loads if the yard prints. I will not cover any shadow names," I said. "I won't ask you to," she answered and meant it. We spread the forms and picked the blanks that mattered. No speeches, just boxes and lines and dates. She wrote slow like each letter cost something. I signed the parts that belonged to me and only me. Ink dried while the air waited for a change. I copied the decree and the last W-2. I photographed the mileage page that matched a deposit. Lee tucked each proof like a medic packing gauze. Her eyes shone but didn't spill, not yet. I respected that restraint more than any thanks. Before she left, she placed a small envelope down. A birth certificate copy and a hospital band slid out. "Keep these until we file," she said, voice almost calm. Trust arrived like a stray dog and sat between us. I didn't touch it and it didn't move. At the door she paused and looked back hard. "If he used another name, you'll tell me?" she asked. I nodded once because truth was the only currency left. "Good," she said, hand on the handle, knuckles firm. "We can't lose more than we already did." The lock turned behind her and the room felt thinner. I held the notebook and the phone like two live wires. The yard would open a gate or slam it shut. Either way, I was already past the point of neutral. The next call would decide how deep I waded. I hit call before doubt could talk. 3 rings, then breath on the line like he jogged. "I need verification for Daniel," I said, voice kept flat. Tonight came back fast, then a click that felt like a dare. Lee returned with the stroller already buckled. "We go now?" she asked, eyes on my keys. "We go now," I answered, because waiting feeds trouble. I locked up and texted the address I didn't want to relive. The lot guard stopped us with a palm in the air. "Closed," he tossed out, gaze sliding to the infant. "Dispatch told us to come," I said, showing the message. He studied it like it might bite, then waved us through. The foreman met us by the way station door. No handshake, just a nod and a tight jaw. "You have 5 minutes," he said, checking the yard behind us. "Audit this week and nothing leaves unless it looks routine. I need pay links and run confirmations." "I need my neck intact," he answered, arms crossed hard. "Print the weekly summary and letterhead it clean." He stared at Lee's face, then at the bundled proof of need. "Not here," he decided, stepping to a side office. A printer warmed and started spitting numbers. Alias shows on route lists, but payroll ties to the license. He slid one sheet over with a finger that trembled. Lee hovered without speaking, and it mattered. I marked 3 dates with a pen in short strokes. "These match my deposit history," I said, keeping it brisk. "That gives us a bridge if anyone asks why. Keep my name out of any affidavit." "Done," I answered, because I could keep that boundary. He stamped the pages and looked away like it burned. "Copy that too, then go. People ask questions at night." Back in the car, Lee exhaled like she'd surfaced. "Tomorrow we file," she said, eyes on the packet. "Tomorrow we return to SSA with this stack." I nodded, but a new risk pressed at my ribs. My phone flashed an unknown number with a state code. I took it and heard a clipped introduction. "Trooper wanted next of kin confirmation for our files." My spine went cold because timing like this cuts. "You already released him to an authorized contact." "Correct, but we have unanswered discrepancies on identity." "Send me the form and I will verify the basics." "I'll email tonight," he replied, then paused like something moved. "What changed?" I asked, slowing the car at a light. "We received results on fingerprints that flagged an alias." "Administrative only, but it complicates benefits," he added. The line went quiet, then ended on a soft click. Lee watched my face and gripped the strap. "What does that mean?" her voice barely above the tire hum. "It means we push clean documents through before mud sticks. And we don't promise what we can't prove," I added, steady. We parked near my place and kept lights low. "I'll scan everything and label each page," I said. "You'll submit as guardian and I'll confirm the marriage. If they call me, I will answer only dates." She nodded hard and pulled the stroller free. A tiny fist stretched and fell back into sleep. "Thank you for doing this at all," she whispered. I felt the old bruise wake and remind me why. Inside, the scanner groaned and the file names stacked. I organized by week and created a separate folder for wages. Lee photographed each screen for her records and relief. We both flinched when a new email popped. The trooper sent the verification sheet with a deadline. I read each line and circled the parts that mattered. Birth name here, work identity here, dates in strict order. I could complete this without bending anything if I held steady. "Will this hurt the claim?" Lee asked, voice tight again. "It might slow it," I said, because false comfort rots. "But the wages and the decree give it spine. We file first thing and keep moving if they stall." She opened her purse and handed me a single photo. A first check with a company logo and a clear signature. "Came with a letter welcoming him to the fleet," she said. My heart kicked because that was a door we needed. I scanned that too and backed up everything twice. Then I printed a one-page summary with simple lines. Dates, employer, relationship history, and 4 words only. I signed where my name belonged and left the rest blank. Night stretched and the room thinned to just tasks. Lee dozed in a chair with the stroller close. I watched the progress bar crawl and finish. Then I pictured the SSA window and the clerk who never blinked. Before dawn I wrote a short script you could follow. No extra details, no stories that invite new questions. We would answer only what matched paper and numbers. Everything else would wait until someone earning a badge demanded it. When the printer cooled, I folded the packet tight. Lee stirred and rubbed her face with brisk hands. You ready? She asked, standing with a small shake. As ready as this will ever get, I answered and meant it. The clerk raised a palm before we reached the counter. Numbers only, forms ready, no extras, her gaze pinned us. Lee rolled the stroller into the line and squared her shoulders. I kept the packet tight under my arm and waited. Our turn arrived with a single nod. Claim for a minor, the clerk said, voice clipped. Lee pushed the envelope forward and held her breath. I set my proof beside it like a wager I might lose. Any other names for the deceased? Her nails paused over the keyboard like a threat. Lee glanced at me and swallowed once. There are variations, I answered, and the keyboard resumed. Employer confirmation must arrive by Friday. We have payroll ties for specific weeks, I replied. Attach them, they are not substitutes, she warned, eyes unreadable. She stamped a receipt and slid it over slow. The supervisor walked behind the glass and stopped. He studied our file like it smelled wrong. Pull the duplicate index, he ordered, not looking at us. My chest tightened because duplicates mean delays and questions. The printer chewed through a list of old identifiers. The supervisor tapped one line and frowned. Another case filed in a nearby office yesterday. Lee's hand found the stroller handle and locked. Who filed? I asked, steady to hide the jolt. Confidential, he answered, gaze returning to the screen. We will notify if claims overlap. That word if dug under my skin and made camp. Is a DNA test required? Lee asked, voice low. Possible if paternity is disputed by another guardian, the clerk said. Not today, she added, and the mercy felt temporary. I took the receipt and saw the date flash like a fuse. We stepped away and found space near the exit. Lee leaned in and whispered through clenched teeth. He kept other lives, I knew it from the quiet. I kept my eyes on the door where trouble might enter. My phone buzzed with an email from the trooper. A scan verification sheet waited for signatures. Return within 72 hours, the note read. A countdown started in my head and refused to stop. I opened the document and checked each blank. The line for work identity carried a warning. Answer truthfully to your knowledge under penalty. I felt the weight land, but I did not step back. We need a notary, Lee said, scanning for options. There's one across the street, I answered, throat tight. We crossed with the stroller and the packet clutched hard. Every red hand on the crosswalk felt like an omen. Inside, the notary read each page with slow care. Sign were highlighted, she said, tapping 3 spots. I signed and dated and kept my hand from shaking. Lee signed as guardian and folded the proof like armor. When we finished, my phone rang again. The yard contact's number flashed with a warning tone. Audit pulled samples from last month, his voice rushed. If anyone asks, you never came by. We have stamped summaries and letterhead copies. Then you never got them from me, he replied. He hung up and left static buzzing in my ear. Lee watched my face and understood without words. Back at the office, we rejoined the line. Add this wage summary to the file, I said. The clerk scanned fast and pushed a barcode our way. Case updated, expect a call for clarification before Friday. As we turned, a woman blocked the path. She held a thin folder and a jaw like granite. Are you here for Daniel? She asked, eyes flat. Lee's grip tightened and the air went sharp. I filed yesterday, the woman continued, chin lifted. He promised support, I have messages, she added. Her gaze flicked to the stroller and hardened. Everything slowed while I picked my next line. I can't discuss this in the lobby, I said. She stepped closer until I could see the knot in her throat. Then hear this, I will contest if they push me aside. She walked past us and left the scent of a fight. Lee looked at me like I could fix gravity. We do not chase her, I said, voice calm. We let the files speak and we prepare, I added. Lee nodded, but the tremor in her lips stayed. Outside, a text arrived from an unknown number. Call me about Daniel's paperwork, it read, short and cold. The area code matched a county office near the crash. I called and braced for the next pivot. Records department, a man answered, breathless and wary. We located a personal locker from the tow yard, he said. Contents include pay stubs and ID variants, he continued. Claimants can view with proper authorization tomorrow. I book D, the earliest slot on Reflex. Lee listened and paced a tight line on the sidewalk. That locker could kill us or save us, she muttered. I felt the swing of it and kept my feet still. We need a witness who knew him professionally. Not a friend, not family, someone who signs, I said. Lee's eyes narrowed as she scanned her contacts. I have a dispatcher who owes me a favor. She dialed and turned away to focus. Short words, a sharp promise, a meeting arranged at noon. Bring the route board screenshot, Lee told her contact. I caught her eye and nodded because this was movement. Back home, I opened the trooper's form again. I filled the basics and left one line blank. The alias confirmation waited like a loaded switch. I needed the locker before I locked that truth. Lee spread our copies on the table in neat rows. She grouped proof by week and marked missing gaps. 2 holes stared up where we lacked deposits. Those holes looked like traps waiting to snap. We can fill one gap with the welcome letter, I said. And maybe the dispatcher can cover the other with logs. Lee chewed her lip and tapped the edge of a page. If she doesn't, we're back to air. The baby stirred and let out a questioning sound. Lee lifted the bundle and swayed without thinking. I watched her settle and felt something shift in me. Responsibility grew a new root and dug in. An email from SSA landed with a bureaucratic thud. Additional information required within 10 days, it read. A checklist opened with 2 fresh demands. Employer tax ID and proof of residence during the final quarter. Tax ID is on the summary somewhere, I said. Lee flipped through until the number surfaced. I scanned it and attached it to the case. The residence proof hung there like a dare. I checked my archives and found a single utility bill. Date aligned with one of the verified weeks. Not perfect, good enough to start the conversation. Lee smiled with one corner of her mouth and exhaled. I hit upload and watched the spinning icon work. The file attached and the system flashed an intake number. Now we wait for the call, I said, pacing again. Waiting is when fear likes to talk the loudest. Before it could start, the phone rang with an SSA prefix. Hold for an adjudicator, a recorded voice instructed. Lee's eyes met mine and we braced together. A human came on and changed the temperature of the room. Confirm your relationship in your own words, the adjudicator's voice sharpened. I gripped the edge of the desk and kept answers tight. Provide dates and employer identifiers, came next, crisp as a blade. Another claimant exists, so we'll need clarity fast. Are you disputing paternity? The question landed like a trap. I'm verifying documents and timelines, I countered, breath measured. Then expect an interview and potential testing if conflict continues. The line clicked off and left a low ringing threat. Lee watched my face and didn't blink. What do we do first? Her hand hovered over the packet. We get the locker contents before anyone rewrites history. I grabbed the keys and checked the clock like it could lie. Traffic bunched and released in jolts that felt personal. Lee fed the baby while scrolling for our noon contact. Dispatcher is ready with screenshots and trip ticks, she reported. We'll meet after the locker if nothing explodes. The records clerk slid a sign-in sheet our way. Authorization, his eyebrows rose when he saw the file note. Viewing only, no removals until chain of custody clears. I nodded and felt the door to luck narrow. He set a plastic bin on the counter with care. Inside, rubber-banded stacks and an envelope with a tow tag. I put on gloves and pulled the first cluster free. Top sheet pay stub with the company tax ID glowing like bait. Under it, a route sheet with times that matched our week. Then a laminated ID with a name I didn't recognize. My throat tightened and then cooled as the pattern clicked. Alias confirmed and now officially part of the file. Photograph through the glass, the clerk instructed, finger tapping rules. I positioned my phone and captured each page slow. Lee tracked images and logged page counts in a notebook. Everything we touched created a new promise to defend. A shadow fell across the counter and stayed there. I turned and saw the woman from the SSA lobby. She lifted her chin and laid a thin folder down. "I'm here for the same bin and the truth." The clerk checked her authorization and hesitated. "Sequential access only, you wait until they finish." She folded her arms and steadied my gloves. "Find anything that hurts children and I push back." I met her stare and chose the narrow path. "We are documenting wages and timelines for a minor." "No games, no storycraft," I added with a level tone. Her lip twitched, then she stepped back without retreating. At the bottom, a handwritten note with 3 initials. "Not his, not mine, not Lee's." "Who is this?" Lee murmured, leaning over the glass. "Dispatcher can decode initials," I said, feeling a door creak. We signed the viewing log and the clerk sealed the bin. "Copies by request within 5 business days," he announced. "Rush possible with supervisor approval," he added, eyes neutral. 5 days sounded like a cliff we were already falling from. Outside, noon hit and the dispatcher texted a location. We walked fast, no chatter, just footfalls and purpose. She waited by a bench and held up her phone. "Screen's ready, I can attest under oath if required." She scrolled to route boards and driver assignments. 2 entries showed Daniel paired with the alias ID. "Payroll still paid to his legal identity," she clarified, jaw tight. "That split happens when safety audits loom. Can you write a statement and attach these captures?" She looked at the stroller and nodded once. "I'll write it now and send from my work account." A pen scratched and my pulse finally eased a notch. My phone buzzed with the adjudicator's number again. "Locker findings must be submitted before close of business. Bring the witness statement and yo." "Or verification sheet," the voice ordered. "Failure to deliver may trigger a hold." "We can make it if we move," I pocketed the statement. Lee adjusted the straps and set a brutal pace. I forwarded images to the case portal while walking. Uploads crawled, then cleared with green check marks. At the office entrance, the lobby woman reappeared. She stood near the door like a checkpoint we couldn't avoid. "Did the locker show 2 identities?" she asked without heat. "Yes, with payroll linked to 1, I answered, leaving nothing extra. She nodded like she expected that exact fracture. "I'm filing to secure what belongs to my child." "Then keep your proof clean," I replied, holding the door. "We all lose if this turns into a guessing game." Inside, the clerk from earlier clocked us immediately. "Submit here, adjudicator wants this scanned on priority." I laid out the images, the dispatcher statement, the verification sheet. The scanner sang and I felt a fragile tide turn. "Initial review complete," the clerk announced after a pause. "Interview moved to tomorrow at 9. Presence of both guardians recommended," she finished, eyes steady. Lee inhaled like she'd been underwater too long. We stepped aside and checked the calendar together. I typed reminders and backup locations for childcare. "If the other claimant attends, keep answers scoped," I warned. "Short lines, no speculation, let paper carry weight." Lee nodded and gripped my wrist for 1 beat. "Thank you for standing in this," she whispered. I didn't trust my voice, so I just squeezed back. Tomorrow would decide whether the system believed the facts. As we left, my phone vibrated with a new alert. The trooper's office confirmed receipt of my notarized form. "Verification accepted, awaiting SSA contact," the email read. 1 hurdle cleared and the bigger one still ahead. We arrived to find the caseworker already waiting. "Both parties present," she confirmed, eyes moving between us. The woman from yesterday sat across with a rigid posture. A man in a plain suit opened a folder and paused. "State your connection in 1 sentence," the caseworker watched our mouths. "Guardian of the child," Lee answered, hands steady on the stroller. "Former spouse with employment records," I said, keeping breath even. "Competing claimant as surviving partner," the other woman added, chin high. The suit slid 2 documents onto the table. A marriage license from another county, using an alternate identity. A second sheet followed like a quiet hammer. Statement of good faith union signed last spring, under that identity. Lee's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "Child entitlement stands if paternity is established," the caseworker noted. "Spousal entitlement affects distribution order and timing." She turned a page and tapped a blank that waited. Does the miner's father have preserved tissue for testing? I pulled up the trooper's email and held the screen. Medical examiner retained a sample for identification and records. The suit grunted once, then wrote a fast line. The other woman pushed a phone across the table. Messages where he promises to amend documents soon. The caseworker skimmed and set the phone aside. Promises are not proof, but they inform intent. We have payroll summaries and dispatch attestation, I offered. I placed the prints and the witness note in reach. The suit inspected logos and dates with slow care. Employment confirmed under legal identity, routing under alias. Explain the alias, the caseworker asked, tone neutral. To secure routes during audits, I replied, shoulders squared. To avoid garnishments, the other woman shot back, eyes sharp. Silence settled like dust and dared us to move. Lee leaned in and kept her voice level. I need the benefit to feed and house a baby. Whatever adults did with promises is separate, she added. The caseworker's pen paused midair, then continued. Here is the path, the suit slid forms to center. Consent for cheek swab on the child today. Authorization to release examiner's tissue for comparison by courier. Affidavits of relationship from both adult claimants. The other woman exhaled through her nose like a warning. I won't obstruct a child, she said, fingers unclenching. But I will defend my status if the law allows. Her eyes met mine like a blade held flat. Lee signed the consent with crisp strokes. I signed the affidavit confirming dates and workplaces only. The other woman signed her version with quick, tight letters. The caseworker gathered pages with practiced efficiency, then stopped. New issue, she held up a printout from the system. Prior wage withholding order under the deceased's legal identity. Arrears exist for support tied to a different dependent. The room shifted in 1 inch and stayed tilted. Lee looked at me without blinking. That order predates your claim, the suit clarified. It may trigger offsets against retroactive payment. Current payments to the minor take priority, but timing changes. I swallowed and kept the plan in view. Do offsets slow the first month? I asked, voice dry. Possible if debt holders contest distribution, the caseworker answered. Proof of paternity accelerates release despite disputes. A nurse entered with a tray and 2 swabs. Lee steadied the baby and kissed his forehead once. The nurse swabbed and sealed envelopes with swift precision. Courier downstairs in 5 minutes, no delays, she said. As the door closed, my phone buzzed twice. A new text glared from an unlisted number. Stop dragging the company into this or files disappear. The initials matched the locker note and my skin went cold. I showed the caseworker the screen without ceremony. She read, then snapped a photo with a work device. Intimidation tied to evidence is a federal problem, the suit said. Forward that to the investigator's queue now. The other woman watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. Dangerous friends, she muttered, rubbing her wrist. Or just scared, I answered, because fear makes messes. Either way, the threat gave our proof more weight. Interview reconvenes after lab confirmation, the caseworker concluded. Provisional status for the minor begins pending verification. Any interference with records halts everything, she warned. We signed acknowledgments and gathered our breathing. In the hallway, the rival claimant stopped me with a palm. He promised to fix the papers after the next run. I believed him, she whispered, grief scraping the words. I nodded once because I knew that belief too well. Outside, my phone rang with the trooper's extension. Courier picked up the vial, the voice reported, brisk and focused. Lab expects delivery by mid-afternoon, he continued. Keep your phone on, results move fast when children are involved. We reached the curb and a truck idled nearby. A familiar silhouette sat behind the wheel and refused to look. The yard foreman stared ahead and lowered his visor. Lee caught it first, then touched my arm like a signal. He rolled forward and stopped with the window half down. Audit expanded, he murmured, eyes locked on the street. Safety pulled logbooks and someone scrubbed the digital board. Your screenshots are now the only clean record. Will you testify if called? I asked, throat tight. I'll confirm the wage summaries, he replied without turning. Nothing else unless subpoenaed, I like breathing. He eased off the brake and vanished into traffic. Lee released a breath she had caged for hours. We hold steady until the lab answers, she said. I nodded and checked the time like it could help. Waiting again, but this time with a fuse already lit. The phone rang before sunrise, and I answered on the first buzz. Paternity confirmed, the lab tech delivered, voice brisk and final. Chain of custody intact and report uploaded to the agency portal. I stared at the screen until relief turned sharp with the next problem. Lee was already awake and buckling the harness with careful hands. Does that unlock payments? She asked, eyes locked on mine. It unlocks the door, I said, because doors can still slam. We left immediately because speed shuts down gossip. At the office, security waved us through with a nod. A conference room waited with a stack of forms and 2 chairs. The rival claimant stepped in behind us and closed the door. She didn't sit, she folded her arms and braced for impact. The adjudicator entered with a tablet and a hard expression. Verification received. We proceed to allocation and any offsets. He looked at each of us like he was measuring temperature. Say only what is necessary, then sign. Lee slid the child's consent receipt across the table. I placed the wage summaries and the dispatcher statement beside it. The rival claimant lifted a slim folder and a single photo. His promise, his intention, she said, voice rough but steady. The adjudicator scanned the lab report and tapped twice. Minor is eligible effective the month after death. Retroactive award subject to withholding order already recorded. He raised his eyes and let the last piece hang. Does the other order consume the arrears for this period? It reduces back pay and slows the first disbursement. Monthly payments to the minor begin regardless, he clarified. Lee gripped the stroller handle until her knuckles blanched. The rival claimant's jaw worked once, then settled. I won't contest what belongs to a child, she said. But I will maintain my separate petition for surviving partner. The adjudicator nodded without sympathy or malice. He turned to me and held out 2 forms. Affirm the employment timeline and confirm no fraud on your part. I read each line twice and signed with a firm stroke. Right then something heavy in me finally shifted. His tab. Lee chimed in. He frowned at the alert. Company records altered last night, audit flagged deleted entries. I slid my phone across with the threat text open. Report that to the investigator on the 2nd floor today. We moved as a group down the hall in a tight line. An investigator logged the message and asked for the locker photos. I forwarded the entire set with timestamps and geotags intact. He looked at me like I had just handed him a match. Back upstairs, a clerk set a card on the table. Provisional approval issued. Disbursement begins next cycle. Expect a follow-up call about offsets in any appeal. The room didn't relax, it just stopped shaking. The rival claimant stepped toward Lee and softened. Send me the formula schedule and the case number. No tricks, she added, opening her palms like a truce. Lee nodded once and shared the details without flinching. We left the building and stood under a loud sky. Lee let out a laugh that broke and rebuilt itself. Milk rent, a crib that doesn't wobble, she whispered. I listened to the list because stakes sound like that. My phone vibrated again with a fresh email from the trooper. Your intimidation report entered federal jurisdiction this morning. Keep copies off-site and avoid meeting yard contacts alone. I thumbed a quick reply and felt sweat at the base of my neck. The dispatcher called from an unknown line and spoke fast. Internal scrub traced to a supervisor on nights, she said. Investigators pulled backups and matched your screenshots. Stay clear for a week, the hive is angry. We drove to my place in a silence that wasn't empty. Lee took the folder to the table and lined up receipts. We return copies to the agency in person tomorrow. I agreed because paper loses fights when left alone. A knock hit the door with 3 heavy beats. The yard foreman stood there with a grim face and no greeting. He held out an envelope and kept his eyes on the street. Subpoena for me, expect one yourself, he muttered. Will you hold to your statement under oath? He nodded once, then twice, like convincing himself. I'll confirm wages and dates, nothing about routing. He left without looking back and I locked the bolts. My email pinged with a case update and a 1-line note. Payments scheduled, card delivery in 5 to 7 days. Lee put her forehead on the table and breathed. I watched her shoulders settle and felt my own finally drop. The rival claimant texted an hour later from an unknown number. I filed for partner status. I won't target the child's portion. Please share if threats escalate. I will corroborate alteration attempts. I sat with that and felt something like respect take root. Night crept in, but tasks kept moving in clean steps. I saved backups to a drive in a cloud account. I wrote an index with dates and proof sources. Then I mailed a hard copy to a box that wasn't mine. Before sleep, Lee stood in the doorway and hesitated. You didn't have to do this, she said, voice small and fierce. I know why you did though, she added, eyes shiny. I nodded because the real answer lived in the quiet. Morning brought a final call from the adjudicator's office. Status active, cardship confirmed, offsets applied only to arrears. Further contact with the company goes through investigators, he concluded. The line clicked and the air in the room felt lighter. We packed the folder and cleared the table one last time. Lee kissed the baby's head and looked at me straight. You pulled us out of a hole, she said, shoulders squaring. Now we keep it, I answered and meant every word. I walked to the door and paused with my hand on the frame. The fear that had ridden me for days loosened and slid off. Guilt tried to stay, but it didn't fit anymore. I stepped outside and left what was left behind.